and John Carpenter. He's doing his thing, but he was very gracious on it. And I told the speakers not to be offended if some of you get up and have to join John in an hour or so. If we run over and that kind of thing. I want to first, with our presentations of 3 this go around, April today, 15th, and then June 3rd and June 24th. And we're skipping May because there are so many activities in May that a lot of people will be in different locations. So, with that said, I also want to say if anyone objects to being photoed in the camera, we are going to possibly, the front rows will be on film. We're going to tape this so someone who is not able to attend today later will be able to view this and the present time that we're having it, and we are not streaming. This will be on a memory stick. And to get started, my favorite, and many of you know her from last time, Patty Barnett Mouton is going to come, and before she and then Tracy will speak, I'm going to have Pastor Park do an opening prayer.
Good morning. Okay, let us pray. Dear God of love and grace, thank you for this wonderful morning. We come before you today with open hearts and minds, seeking your guidance and blessings as we gather here for this presentation hosted by the University United Methodist Church Health Ministry Team and led by Trace Bell. We are grateful for the opportunity to serve in the health ministry of our community and learn strategies to keep and improve our brain health. We thank you for the blessings of good health and the ability to care for others in need. We ask for your guidance and wisdom to be bestowed upon us as we listen and learn from Tracy, who will be sharing her knowledge and insights with us. May her words be filled with clarity and inspiration, guiding us on the path towards the well-being of our community. We also lift up in prayer all those who are in need of physical, emotional, or spiritual healing. May your loving touch be upon them, bringing comfort, strength, and restoration. Grant them the patience and endurance to persevere in their health journey, and may our health ministry be a source of support and compassion to them. We ask for your blessings upon our health ministry team, equipping us with the skills, knowledge, and compassion to serve our community. We pray for the leaders and members of this ministry team that they may continue to be instruments of your healing and love to those in need. Bless Tracy and Patty abundantly for her willingness to share their knowledge and expertise with us. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Good morning. You all look terrific, and you're going to be even more terrific and even smarter and brighter when you get finished with Tracy's wonderful presentation this morning. Many of you I know, it was fun out in the courtyard going, wait, I know you. I said, yeah, we were here last year. So my name is Patty Mouton. I serve as Vice President at Alzheimer's Orange County, and I've been there for 18 years, and every time we do a program like this, I get up in the morning so excited because all of you that are here, You're not only going to get some great tips to improve your memory this morning, you are taking profound action to reduce your risk of developing symptoms of a dementia by getting up, socializing, having a purpose, learning something new, and then putting it to work, and maybe even sharing it with somebody else. You are doing not only wonderful purpose-driven work, but you are improving your brains synapse by synapse. So well done. It's just such a pleasure to be back here at University United Methodist. Kay has become not only a wonderful colleague in the community, but now we're BFFs for sure. So Alzheimer's Orange County is your local community-based not-for-profit that provides support, respite, counseling, advocacy, both for patients and in the legislative arena, and education, like what you're experiencing today. So we are so embedded in our Orange County community that today we brought a true Orange County native to be your speaker. Tracy Bell is a master's of social work. She did her studies at Cal State Fullerton. She actually was born right here in Orange County. She's been with Alzheimer's Orange County since 2021, and she is the master coordinator of our helpline, which is where families, people, caregivers, clinicians call in if they've got a question or they need to be connected to information and resources in the community, if they're having a problem with the person for whom they're providing care, if they just want more information, or if they want to get involved. So Tracy has a very pivotal role with us. She is passionate about the people that we serve and really interested in every single case that comes across her desk. She's going to talk to us about sharpening our minds this morning, so take some notes, take it all in, and if you forget something, we're going to be back in a couple of months, and we'll be talking about another topic related to all of this, but we are going to be on tape, so you'll be able to see it again, and we can have Tracy come back anytime you like. So with that, please welcome Tracy Bell, your speaker this morning for Sharpen Your Mind.
Okay, let me lift that up a little bit. Thank you. There we go. Yes, I'm a little. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming on this Saturday morning. And I'm going to probably wake everyone up a little bit more because our presentation has a lot of interactive aspects. So as Patty said, I'm one of the social workers on our helpline at Alzheimer's Orange County. So if any of you are interested in connecting with us after by phone, you might get lucky enough to speak with me or one of our other amazing social workers and ask your questions that you have related to memory loss. You don't necessarily have to have a diagnosis to connect with us. We welcome any and every question that individuals have. So again, thank you all for being here this morning. And like I said, my presentation today is called Sharpen Your Mind, Memory Tips and Teasers. And I will be having a lot of teasers to throw at you. So again, like I said, we might wake up a little bit more on this Saturday morning. And I saw many of you having your coffee already, so I'm sure that might have helped. But we'll also be learning some aspects of what just makes our memory, and what are some things how we can improve our memory as well. So for my first about 20 slides or so, I'm just going to be briefly showing you some pictures. And each picture will be shown on the presentation screen here behind me just for a few seconds each. And throughout that, just take in the picture because after, throughout my presentation, we're going to go back to these pictures, and I'm going to see how many of these you remembered. And some of you might be laughing at me right now saying, I'm not going to remember any of these pictures, but you'd be surprised how many of these pictures that you might be able to recall later on. So I have one of my helpers back here, and she'll just quickly go through each picture, like I said, briefly, and just take each picture in individually. At the end of my presentation today, I just want to mention, please feel free to ask questions, or we'll also be outside at our table, so you can come up to me individually. And if you'd like to share your story or ask questions, I'll be here. So thank you again so much for being here this morning. So we're going to start with those pictures now. And just take each one in individually. Okay, so like I said, we're going to go back to these pictures. Hope you all remember them. No, but like I said, I think you'd be surprised how many of you are able to recall these pictures later on. But before we get into them, we're going to go back to now, like I said, kind of talking about our memory. So next slide, please. All right, thank you. So I want to talk about our first stage of memory, and that is our sensory memory. So our sensory memory is our shortest stage of memory, and oftentimes just from day to day within the world, we have a lot of things coming at us at every single moment of the day. So it's oftentimes, it can be impossible to remember every little thing that's going on. So think of your sensory memory as a radar. And though the radar is taking in our senses, so we have our 5 senses here, including sight, hearing, or smell, and etc. But that radar is deciding what's important, because we might be hearing something that someone's saying to us, and we're saying, oh, that's important to listen to. Maybe we're in the kitchen and we're smelling something that's burning. Oh, that's important. We better tend to that. And also for later on, too, we're thinking, oh, okay, I can't leave the pot on the stove for that long. If not, that smell will come back. So this, again, is our sensory memory, and it uses our senses to take in what's important. Okay, next slide. Okay, so next level, we have our primary memory. So there are 3 different levels to our memory, and our primary memory is oftentimes the one that's most affected by our age. So in terms of primary memory, that includes information of our conscious awareness, and it has limited capacity of chunks of information. And like I said, that's oftentimes, mildly affected by aging. So that's the stuff that we're kind of taking in, that maybe someone just said to us outside while we were having coffee. So we're taking it in and trying to remember what's important, but oftentimes, since it just happened a few minutes ago or 30 minutes ago today, our memory or our mind is also deciding, is that important to remember later on? So next one. Okay, so secondary memory. Oh, okay. So apologize, we have some noise, but if I can't hear, just kind of go like that, and I'll raise my voice here. But our secondary memory is our memory. Think of it like a library. We're storing everything, again, that's important to us within our memory, and it's sorting through, making sure that what we keep is important to us to remember. It remains it's oftentimes recall is most vulnerable, and recognition remains stable in this one. And next slide, please. And lastly, we have our tertiary memory. So this is our deepest memories. Think of these memories like a bank vault, and these memories are from childhood oftentimes. So they are deepest in our core memories, and these are the least affected by aging. Oftentimes, I'm sure someone might bring up childhood, and it's something that and if it was significant, such as where you lived when you were a child, or where you went to school, that's oftentimes something that you can easily recall. And this is oftentimes, too, the tertiary memory, when we see individuals having memory loss, is, again, the last to be affected. So when you might see individuals starting to have memory loss, again, that goes back to our short-term memory or our primary memory that you'll start seeing that's affected first off. So next slide. All right, so now we're back to our teasers part. So this is, again, I'd love some audience participation, or if you'd like to answer in your head, however you feel comfortable, but feel free to shout them out as I say them or fill in the blanks. So a bad workman blames his tools, yes. A bird in the hand is worth two in a bush. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Birds of a feather flock together, and east is east, and west is west, and never the twain shall meet. Yes. All right. So on to my next slide. Back, please. Sorry about that. Some of you guys might have seen the answer, but for those maybe who didn't, so how can 8 plus 8 equal 4? Hours, yes. So think of, some of you might have seen it, but for those who might have known, I want you to also, throughout this presentation, try to think about things outside of the box. And that kind of goes to the everyday life. It kind of gets our brain going. Just because we see something one way, we might think, how can it equal this? So again, 8 plus 8 equals 4. We're thinking about it in hours. So instead of looking at like a math equation, now if we take 8 a.m. plus 8 hours equals 4 p.m. So next slide. Yes, so there we have it. Again, just thinking outside of the box here, and kind of, I'm sure it's waking some of you up as well this morning too. So next slide. Okay, what is harder to catch the faster you run? Your breath, yes. Okay, all right, next one. Okay, so I have quite a large number up on the screen. Let me see if I can say it here. I have 8,549,176,320. What might be unique about this number? And anyone who'd like? Yes, that's one thing. Yeah, none of the digits repeat. And let me say the numbers out just one by one. So I have 8, 5, 4, 9, 1, 7, 6, 3, 2, 0. What might be unique about that? Okay, I see a lot of you kind of, trying to figure it out, but let me go to the next slide here. So if we spell out the numbers, they're in alphabetical order. So again, kind of thinking outside the box here. I know when we see numbers just written out on their own, that's kind of how we want to see them. But once we write them out, we can see now it's in alphabetical order if we were to write them out as the word. So next slide. All right, so we have another image here, but it's just one. And I want you to study this image. I'm going to give you all about 30 seconds or so to take in this image. I know for some of you in the back, it might be a little hard to see all the details, but what can you see that's interesting? What might I ask you about it later? And try to remember as many details as you can. All right, so we're going to go on to the next slide. All right, so now that you all had a moment to take a look at that slide, and I'm sure some of you, we can all work together and answer some of these questions here. How many people were in the image? Three or four. I hear a few mixed answers. I see four. Okay. How many, and what were the people doing? Mowing the lawn. Swinging. Watering the plants. Okay. Yes. I hear, a lot of you got what they were doing. What was the house address? Wow, I'm surprised how many of you got that. I got 1052, yes. And that was kind of small, so good job. I know sometimes the images are a little small. So what was lying on the steps? A hammer. And what was leaning against the house? A bike. All right, let's go back. Next slide to the image. All right, so I think we got it all. There were four people in the image. We have someone mowing the lawn, someone walking the dog, someone swinging, doing the gardening, the house number of 1052, the hammer, and also the bike. So again, if you didn't get them all, I'm sure we all worked as a group to get it all as well. So thank you all for playing here. So next slide. All right, so now we're back to the images that I showed you at the very beginning. In a few seconds here, I'm going to show you two images. One is the image that we saw earlier, and the second image is one that you hopefully have never seen before, but it's going to be A or B. And I'm going to ask if it was A or B, and if you guys could all yell out or answer if the image that I showed earlier was A or B, and I think you'd be surprised how many of you all are able to recall those images. And just to kind of give it in context, I showed 21 images earlier. So if you are able to get through them all, even if you're able to get through half of them, I think that's amazing. So, and again, we'll have each other to kind of help us out. So let's go through. All right. B. Okay. Mm-hmm. A. B. Mm-hmm. B. Mm-hmm. A. Mm-hmm. B. Mm-hmm. B. All right, and that's our answers. I think throughout all the slides, I know, give yourselves a round of applause. Good job. And I think throughout the slides, I heard a unanimous kind of all throughout a strong A or B. I didn't hear one kind of any questions there. I think everyone was pretty strong in terms of the pictures, and we all helped each other too as well. So I just want to go over and just kind of say our minds are really amazing in terms of what we can remember when we're paying attention. So again, we were all quiet during the first half of my presentation, taking in those pictures. And I just want to share that in the 80s, a study was done where individuals were shown thousands of pictures over the course of a few weeks. And individuals were able to guess about 80% of the pictures shown to them when shown back as this form of answering A or B. So next thing I want to talk about is what is normal versus not normal in terms of our memory. So next slide. Okay. So I know some of you might have been affected in terms of a family member, someone you know, a friend, by memory loss such as dementia, Alzheimer's, one of them. Or you might be concerned yourself, do I have memory loss? So I just want to go over a few kind of quick snapshot of what is normal memory versus not normal. So one thing could be forgetting where you put your checkbook. So that could be a normal sign of age-related memory. What might not be normal is forgetting where you bank. That could be a red flag. Next is forgetting what you ate for breakfast versus forgetting that you ate breakfast. Getting lost in a new city versus getting lost in your neighborhood. And lastly, forgetting where you parked in the mall, normal, versus forgetting that you drove yourself to the mall. So these are all signs that could be in terms of not normal age-related memory loss. And I do let individuals know that a lot of times you might not realize it yourself. It might be a friend or family member who points out, hey, I've seen these concerns myself. Can we talk about it? Have you gone to the doctors? And also just you yourself being open to individuals who are concerned about you, because even just being a part of a church family here, I'm sure you have many individuals that you see every single week. And if they come up to you and say, I have these concerns, they're only doing it out of love, not to be mean or malicious. So just it really helps having a support system around you. So talking about a support system, onto our next slide. Click a few more times. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk briefly about our 6 pillars of healthy aging. And this is actually a full class in itself where we go in depth about the 6 pillars. And we actually have a handout that some of you might have taken from our table regarding these 6 pillars. But if you did not take a handout, please feel free to take one on your way out. Also, like I said, this is a whole class that we have regarding these 6 pillars. So please feel free to take a calendar as well, and you'll see the class. It's called Mind Your Brain, and it goes again in depth about what can we do to improve our cognition. So there are 6, there's been proven 6 ways that we can love our brains, and those include diet and nutrition, exercise and physical health, cognitive activity, social engagement, sleep and relaxation, as well as medical health. And some of these you probably know, like, okay, I know to eat healthy, I know to exercise, I know kind of to keep track of my medical. But one thing I always like to point out is the social engagement and Patty did point that out today in her opening, that, it's great that we're all here today, and you all have this support system. And also, too, even before you all came in here, I observed many of you getting to speak to one another and chatting and following up. And I'm sure you might come tomorrow, too, and do the same, connect with others and have that time of social engagement. And that's a very big aspect of lowering our cognitive risk of memory loss. In terms of our 6 pillars of healthy aging, I know implementing 6 new things in our life can be quite difficult for some of us. But I do encourage individuals, even if you make a change in one of these aspects, it can oftentimes make a big difference. So just something to think about, that, again, this is all of these pillars done together can help lower your risk of cognitive decline. And again, we do have a handout going over different things that you can implement into your daily life to hopefully improve yourself. So next slide. All right. So I'm going to go over a few things here, and then we're going to go back to our teasers. So strategies for improving our memory. So there are 3 strategies that we could do to improve our memory. And the first is paying attention. The next is creating a strategy of creating a visual image in your mind. And lastly, the third strategy is forming an association. So these are different methods that could utilize these strategies, but the one I'm going to be talking about today is called the Look, Snap, Connect method. So next slide. Okay, so again, the technique that I'll be talking about is called Look, Snap, Connect. And there are just 3 simple steps and how we can implement this. So again, we're going to be first is to look. So when we're paying attention and actively observing, then we can help recall what we were doing later on. If we're not paying attention or doing the first step in this method, we can't go back to that memory later on because we never had that memory to begin with. Snap is taking a picture, kind of like a mental snapshot if you can. And lastly, connect. So we're decoding the information and linking them together. So next slide, please. Okay. So again, our first step is look. We're paying attention and focusing on what we want to remember. So paying attention, again, is the first step in creating a memory. When we pay attention, we are using our sensory memory or using our radar and taking everything in that we can. Asking yourself what something looks like, sounds like, or maybe how something might smell, taste, or feel. So using all these senses enriches our memory and also helps process the information on a much more meaningful level. So we're going to try it ourselves in an example, and I'll go through on how to kind of use it, and then we'll have some examples that I'm going to encourage you to interact with a little bit later using this method. So we've been asked to buy tulips from the florist. So we're paying attention. I've been asked to buy tulips from the florist. So let's go on to the next slide for snap. So next, snap is we are linking or relating the 2 or more things together in a meaningful way. So we're associating, and association is what the brain naturally wants to do when learning new information, and association can also jog our memory. So visualization is what we want to do to remember things. So in this case, what does 2 lips sound like? It kind of sounds like lips. So we can visualize a pair of lips when trying to recall our task. So So as we see, we have our tulip here. Again, we were paying attention, so look, and then snap. We're visualizing a tulip, and we might also be visualizing lips. So we're making that association. And next slide. All right, so now we want to combine the two images. So finally, we have the visual image, and we're connecting them together. So that's what our mind wants to do, to remember things. So for example, if we have something to maybe mail, we might visualize ourselves going to the post office, putting the mail in the envelope in the mailbox to be mailed off. Maybe we have an important call later. We might visualize ourselves dialing the number or calling the individual, and also maybe thinking about, what am I going to talk to them about? So when trying to connect things, try to hold the image in your mind for a few seconds and focus on the details. Oftentimes, you'll be more likely to remember them later on. So now we're, again, going back to the tulips. We are associating and combining the two images, and connecting the two images will allow us to hopefully recall our to-do list later on. So next. So we have tulips. And also, I heard some of you chuckle as well. So we encourage individuals too to kind of, even if you make something that's kind of silly, that will help you remember later on, because you might say, oh, thinking about tulips with my lips on them, that kind of made me laugh. And when going to the floral shop later on, you might think, what was I here to buy? And like, oh wait, tulips, my lips. That's what I thought of to remember my list. So we're going to do a few more examples to really drive this method home. And, it might not be something that you use from your day to day, but we do encourage individuals, when you can, maybe you try to utilize this to give your brain a little memory teaser. And whatever you've been doing before to write down lists to remember things, you can continue doing them, writing them down in your phone or on a piece of paper. But this can also just kind of help with your cognitive stimulation as well. So on to our next slide. Okay, so we have another list here. This might not be a list that any of you ever have. We have a helicopter and palm trees, but this is just an example of how we can use the look, snap, connect method again. So for look, we looked at our list. We see we have helicopter and palm trees. So next, we think about a mental image. Okay, this is what a helicopter looks like. This is what palm trees look like. But how can we connect these two images to remember them? So would anyone maybe like to share how we can connect these two images? Yes, I heard a few of you, putting the palm fronds on the blade. So let's go to the next. You called it. So putting the palm fronds as the blade. So it kind of is a silly image, but it will help us remember our list later on. And we're taking a mental snapshot of that and be like, okay, palm fronds, the helicopter. Again, you might not ever have a list of palm trees and a helicopter, but it's just an example of how we can utilize the look, snap, connect method. So on to the next slide. Okay, this is probably a more practical one. So let's say you go to Irvine Spectrum and you park your car on level 3B. What can we maybe do using the look, snap, connect method to possibly remember where our car is on level 3B? So some of you, or we've had some people say, when I go to the mall, I just look at something I'm near and remember. So that's a great way to remember where you've parked, picking an anchor. One thing to remember is that you might not want to be like, oh, I parked next to this really cool car, it's bright orange, because when you go back, that car won't be there probably. and you won't remember where your car was and circling around. So another one might be, for us ladies, I know I have a purse and I might write, I have a little notebook and I might write it down in my notebook. I also might take a picture of where it is on my phone. We all have phones that have cameras now, so we might take a picture. Okay, this is where I parked today. So again, this method might not be something that you use from day to day, but it is something just fun to kind of stimulate our cognition, which, as I briefly covered, can lower our risk of cognitive decline. So I want to do this example with you guys, and then we'll go on to the next one. So for this example, what I did is I said, 3B, okay. I paid attention to 3B. That's the level I parked on. Then using the SNAP method, I have connecting two or more things in a meaningful way. So 3B, well, B, if I say it's an animal or an insect, I should say. So maybe I might think of 3 bees on top of my car. So next slide. Okay, so this is the image I created. So I have 3 bumblebees buzzing on top of my car, and that's how I recall where I parked. So next one. Okay, so now we have another level that we parked on. We parked on level 5E. And again, these using the Look, Snap, Connect method is different for everyone. Someone might think, we had someone share that they remembered where level 5E was because E was the 5th letter of the alphabet, and that's what worked for them. So in terms of using the Look, Snap, Connect method, what might help you recall where you parked your car on level 5E? Anyone want to share? 5 elephants, there we go. And that's actually our example. So 5 elephants on top of a car. I know, it looks like someone studied. No. But also, too, you might want to think about your senses as well. How might you feel when you see 5 elephants on top of your car? What might it smell like? What might it sound like? So all of these combined, using them together, will help you hopefully recall where you parked your car and what level on later on. So next slide. So here is another real life example. We have to go pick up eggs and go to the post office. So thinking about that, we know what an egg looks. So think about what an egg looks like. And we might think of a single egg. We might think of eggs in a carton. And then also go to the post office. So for that, we have a few different images that we can think of. We might think of our mailman. We maybe might think of a stamp. We might think of a mailbox. And how can we combine these 2 images to help us remember this list? Stamping the eggs. Yes, yes. So next image, or next slide. Yep, and that is I feel like we had a few people read ahead. No. But we have our egg with a stamp on it. And I always like to joke now, I also might feel a little, I don't want to mail my egg because eggs are a little expensive right now. So that might make me kind of chuckle because I want to keep the eggs for myself. So next slide. All right, so this is a little bit longer of a to-do list. And as you see, we kind of just highlighted the important things. So we have to make a spare key, and we also have to call the tree trimmer. So how might we utilize the Look, Snap, Connect method and combine these very 2 unrelated things and make them something that we're able to recall later on? So again, we have to go get a spare key and call the tree trimmer. So for a spare key, we might just think of a key, But tree trimmer, we can think of a few different things. Maybe we can think of a tree, we can think of leaves, or someone trimming a tree. Anyone want to share maybe what they thought of? A key to the tree house. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we have a few images. I know Kay said she had thought of a key to a tree house, and I feel like that's kind of what we see on the right side. But on the left side, we have keys as leaves. So again, we're combining these two unrelated things into an image to help us recall it later on. And there is no right or wrong way to do it. Whatever you think of is correct. And like I said, it might not be something that you do every single day, but it is something that can help just stimulate our cognition, which will help us later on. So next slide. All right, so now we're on to the story method. So the story method helps us remember longer lists. And we can put a few sentences together to create a story that links items together. So one sentence links or leads to the next, and therefore we have a story that associates all these items together that we want to remember. So if we can try and form images and then picture segments of the story. So once you made a story, recite it to yourself a few times to try and remember your items so you can retell the story, and that will in which jog your memory later on. So we're going to practice what the story method looks like. Okay, so again, we kind of have a silly list up here, but this is just for an example. We have words including kangaroo, pajamas, cornfield, and guitar, and we're creating a story, and it could look a single sentence, a few sentences, but just a silly story to try and help us remember these items. So I'm going to go and show you what this looks like just so you guys can have an idea of how to use the story method. So next slide, please. Okay, so the story that we have here is kind of silly and will help you remember, though, later on. So I was playing my guitar while waiting for my pajamas to dry on the clothesline when a kangaroo grabbed my pajamas from the line and ran through the cornfield. And I'm sure you can all kind of think about how that looks as well. Seeing a kangaroo grab your pajamas, run through the cornfield, while maybe you're playing your guitar, looking upon your prairie or your cornfield, whatever you might have. So again, this is a silly story that we came up with, but helps incorporate everything that we need to remember later on. So now we're going to go to the next slide, please. And these words are a little bit more practical. Again, it might not be a list that you have, but just utilizing these words into creating a story. And if anyone might want to share what little story they made up utilizing these words. It might take a second to read through. So we have hammer, guitar, thumb, train, museum, socks, and Band-Aid. Would anyone like to share the story that they made utilizing these words? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have, I came back from the museum on the train in my socks, hit my thumb with the hammer, and needed a Band-Aid. So we have about like 2 sentences there, a little short story to help us recall these words. And again, you might recite it to yourself a few times to help you remember. And therefore, later on, you're able to recall what the list was. So I'll show you our example here. Okay, so while riding the train to the museum, I'm strumming my guitar with a hammer. I hit my thumb with the hammer and use my socks as a Band-Aid. So fairly similar on the same route here, but it helps us recall what these words were. And again, we might recite it to ourselves a few times so we will remember these words later on. So we're going to try one more here. Next slide. All right, thank you. So this time we're going to be using phrases. So this is probably a list that you might have from day to day, and we are needing to buy a cooked chicken, bring flowers to a friend, and RSVP for a nephew's wedding. What short story can we come up with to utilize these three? You don't necessarily have to use the phrases. You can just take certain aspects of the word or what's important to you to help you remember it later on. And if anyone wants to share, if not, I'll share our example, what they came up with. I know this one's a little bit trickier, so I'll show you our example here. Okay, so the chicken brought a bouquet of flowers to the wedding. So we didn't use the phrases, we just used the important words or the key phrases from each or the key words from each phrase, and therefore we can just say it a few times. Okay, the chicken brought a bouquet of flowers to the wedding, and then I'll remember this is what I have to do for the day. And it also kind of makes you chuckle, and that will help you remember it later on a little bit easier. Okay, so, all right. So now we are remembering names and faces. So remembering names and faces is oftentimes our most common memory complaint. And it's not an uncommon challenge to experience that, I know I met someone and I know their face, but I just can't recall their name. So oftentimes we might or what we see individuals might not being able to recall individuals' names is because when they were first meeting one another, they weren't paying attention. So usually when you're being introduced to someone, there's a lot of things going on, such as other background noise, maybe other people talking, or also you might feel a little bit nervous. What am I going to say next to them? What are they going to say to me? So there's a lot of other things going on in your mind that, saying their name is probably just a few seconds of the full conversation. So again, it's a common memory complaint that we hear, but we're going to go over a few things on how can we help ourselves remember names and faces a little bit easier. So next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so here are some strategies for helping with names. So we want to pay attention to the name. Repeat it and use it if we can. If, we're meeting someone, we're having a short conversation with them, we might want to repeat it and just say, oh, can you say that again? And so you can hear it and then try to say, oh, nice to meet you, and their name. Maybe ask for a spelling. If it is maybe a more unique name, you can ask how they spell it. Ask for a background. Sometimes names, again, are unusual or remind you of someone. We had in many individuals, or one individual, I guess, who teaches this presentation, say that someone in their previous class had the same name as their granddaughter, and that was some way to help him remember that individual's name. Maybe if you can, write it down as soon as you can. Ask yourself, what does the name sound like? Does it rhyme with anything? Or does it have an association? In those cases, change maybe the name a little bit to sound like something more familiar, such as Sylvia might sound like Silver or Silver Sylvia to help you recall that name later on. And then again, does this name help remind you of anyone? Maybe a close family, a friend, or if you already know someone with that name already. So next slide. All right, so we're bringing back the look, snap, connect method, but now for names. How can we use this with names? So I just want to go over the look, snap, connect method and how we utilize it with names. And for look, we're going to identify a facial feature or something that the name rhymes with or that we can associate with the individual. Snap, we are forming an outrageous or exaggerated image associating the facial feature or rhyming the name with the new transformed name. And lastly, we're connecting. We're transforming the name into a saying or a name that we can hopefully help remember. So we're going to, next slide, utilize it on these famous actors here on how we can use the look, snap, connect method. So do you all recognize these two men up here? I hear some. Yes, yes. So first on the left-hand side, we have Jimmy Durante, I should say, sorry. So for Jimmy Durante, we are looking at him. We are identifying that he has a larger nose, as we could probably see. And then for Snap, we might think of him with a more exaggerated nose than he already has. And Connect, we might say, or help remember his name as Big Nose Jim, to help us remember his name. And some of these look, snap, connect methods might just be for yourself. Of course, we might not go up to someone and say, hey, Big Nose Jim. But for Jimmy Durante, he is someone who knew he had a big nose and schnoz, yes, and embraced it. So next we have Marty Feldman on the right-hand side. And the prominent facial feature is kind of staring us in the face. He has some wide eyes. So for Snap, we think of Marty with maybe bigger eyes, maybe some googly eyes. I mean, his eyes are already pretty prominent. And then we can connect it all. So we think maybe wide-eyed Marty when we try to think of his name. So again, these are actors that their facial features were quite prominent and they embraced them. So we might not do that for everyone, but we'll go over some examples on how we can remember individuals' names. So next slide, please. So this is our new neighbor. His name is Bob Burger. So that's kind of an easier one because his last name, Burger. So we have a picture of Mr. Bob Burger and also a picture of a hamburger. So maybe we might combine these two images. Next slide, please. And think of Mr. Bob Burger, or at least just Mr. Burger, and think of a hamburger on top of his head to help us recall his name later on. So next slide. So now we have Carlos. So again, we're trying to use the look, snap, connect method with Carlos. And what maybe might stand out about Carlos? His eyes, I heard. Okay. Anything else? His dimples. Okay. So for this method, like I said, it can work for anyone. For our example today, Carlos is kind of tan, or he's got a good tan on, even though we're not in summer yet. So next slide. And Carlos kind of sounds like car or carload. So next slide. So I think I have Carlos and I have a car. So next slide, please. And although Carlos's car is on top of his forehead, I think of Carlos maybe in a red convertible going down PCH with the top down and getting his nice tan. So maybe I might think of Carlos or carload Carlos as kind of a way to help me remember his name later on. So next slide. All right, so now we have Sherry. What might be a prominent feature of Sherry? Her smile. She's got a quite nice smile. And this example probably isn't the best one as, next slide. Next slide, please. Sherry with the cherry earrings. And although she has earrings today, she might not have earrings the next time you meet her. But at least Sherry and cherry rhyme. So you think Sherry with the cherry earrings or Sherry Cherry to help you recall her name. All right, so now we have Harrison. Harrison is quite handsome here. What is probably prominent about him? His hair. Yes, yes. It looks like he probably gets up in the morning and takes some time on that hair. So, so we have, next slide, Harrison with hair that shines in the sun. Or you might think of Harry Harrison to help you recall his name later on. Next slide. So we have Tina. What is a prominent feature of Tina? Her eyes, I heard. Okay. And for, yeah, she kind of has an interesting pose here with her neck. But for our example here, her teeth are quite prominent, or her smile. So we have Tina with the toothy smile to help us recall her name. Tina with tilt. That's a good one. I like it. Tina with the tilt. All right. So this is Ben Allen, and he is one of our staff members who also presents these brain health education classes. And someone from a previous class actually did one of these word and picture associations with him, and they came up with Ben Allen is Ben Allen is an Allen wrench with a gray mustache. So that is one way to help us remember Ben Allen. And since Ben Allen got one, I thought I would like one too. So I did my name is Tracy Bell. So what I did is trace the bell to help recall my name. So next slide. All right, so I just have a few more teasers to kind of lead us out before you all go today. So this is a phone number up here. And although we might not need to remember phone numbers all too often anymore, it's still something that maybe we might find ourselves in. I know when I've called the doctor's office before, they said, this is not the right number. And then they just start listing off a number. I'm like, whoa, I don't have paper, I don't have pen. But, it could also help me say, okay, say it again, and I'll write it down, but maybe I'll try to remember it as well, just to have that cognitive stimulation again. So with this phone number, we have kind of a unique way to remember it. So if we break it down, in the first part we have 876. And what might be unique about that? They're descending or going down. And then we look at the next part, we have 1776 or 1776. What might be unique about that? Yes, the Declaration of Independence. So in terms of numbers, we're lucky enough that the area code is its own or has parentheses, and then the number has a dash in it to help us break it down and understand it a little bit better. So like I said, you might not be trying to or have to remember numbers, but it can be useful to remember. I'm sure you have some important individuals in your lives, numbers memorized in case of emergency. But also, too, if you have a number to remember just from day to day, you might find yourself needing to recall an important number. It's a good way to, again, help stimulate our cognition. So, next one. So I'm testing you. Who is this? Bob Burger? Okay. Next slide. Carlos. Sherry. Ben. And who is this? Thank you. Yes. All right. Okay, so that concludes our presentation today. I just want to thank you all for being a great audience. I know it was a lot of information, but also, too, I hope we broke it up with some fun teasers as well. And, it's just a great first step that you're doing here today. You got your social engagement, you had your cognitive stimulation. I'm sure some of you are also walking around too, we got some exercise. So we already at least checked off 3 of those 6 pillars of healthy aging today. So I know some of you who have surveys, if you could take some time to fill that out, we would greatly appreciate that and hand that to one of our staff on your way out. If you did not receive one, no worries. It's okay. If you'd like to, there might be still some outside, but if not, no worries. We understand that you might not have the time or did not receive one, but behind me is some of our information that we offer. I know some of you stopped by our table today and received some handouts, but if you haven't, please feel free to do so. We still have lots to give, and our helpline number is up there. And like I said, I am one of the social workers on the helpline. So if you are having questions after this, we are available on our helpline Monday through Friday from around 8:30 to 5. You might be lucky enough to get me or one of, again, our amazing social workers to answer your questions or any inquiries. We do have many brain health classes throughout the community. So if you liked what I did today, please take a calendar and look through our calendar to see our upcoming ones. And you also might get lucky enough to see my colleague Ben Allen present one of these as well. Again, we have our phone number. Next slide. We're also on social media. So if you have a Facebook, please feel free to like our page on Facebook. That is where we have our post our upcoming events and just us in the community, any updates. And next slide. And then we also lastly have our website. So please feel free to go on our website and look at all of our information there as well. But I guess before I close this out here, does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask now with the group? Okay, I don't see any hands raised, but I just want to thank you all for being so interactive, especially on a Saturday morning, and I'm sure the coffee and donuts helped. So thank you all. And if you have any questions, we will be outside, and please also feel free to hand our surveys to our staff. So thank you, everyone. And I think Patty has a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. I feel smarter already, don't you? Now, we have a little bit of time, so if you have other questions about dementia, about issues of aging, we talked a lot last session about preparing for serious illness and even end of life. So this is an opportunity, because you have both of us here. If you have other questions about aging or risks for dementia, or ways that you can strengthen your system and your overall health to help reduce your risk, this is a time where you get to ask almost any question you like. Yes, ma'am. Oh, excellent question. What's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? Dementia is an umbrella term, much like saying cancer. So if your doctor says, I'm very sorry you have cancer, what's your next question going to be? What kind? Right, because having a little basal cell carcinoma on your hand is a lot different than pancreatic cancer, because it's going to be treated differently, the severity of the illness is different, the trajectory and prognosis are very different, right? So in dementia, there are more than 120 different diseases or brain injuries that can cause symptoms of dementia. So, dementia is this constellation syndrome of symptoms, which would always include some kind of memory loss or forgetfulness, but that might not be the presenting symptom. So somebody might say, I've been falling a lot, or I just can't seem to get my checkbook balanced. Or, I was driving the other day and I just couldn't remember which off-ramp. And then I got off and I wasn't sure which direction to go. And this was someplace that's very familiar. So it's a constellation of symptoms that leads to a diagnosis of dementia. From there, we have to tease out with some very specific diagnostic testing, neuropsychological testing, maybe brain scans, some blood tests to determine what kind of dementia it is. Very important because there are some health conditions that can cause people to have the confusion and other difficulties that looks like early stage Alzheimer's disease, but may be the result of an untreated low thyroid, or poorly managed blood sugar, or chronic dehydration, or maybe a low-level urinary tract infection, maybe a B12 deficiency or some anemia. There's many physical problems that can cause people to appear and feel very confused. So we want to rule those out, because if that's what's causing this, we can fix that. The other side of the diagnosis is, let's say it's Alzheimer's type dementia, which accounts for about 65-ish% of all dementias. Pardon me. The earlier we start on the medications that we currently have for Alzheimer's disease, the better the person is likely to receive and get benefit from those medications. If people know as early as possible that they have a long-term cognitive disease, then they can plan ahead for their future care. They can say, no, we're not going to buy that $1 million house on the beach because I may need to have that money set aside in case I need care later. You may have to then look at, gosh, are we going to go on this big vacation this year? Maybe yes, because maybe in 2 or 3 or 5 years you really won't be up to traveling. Maybe you want to be sure that you tell your children what's going on, because maybe they're going to have to help in some of the decisions that will be made about your care in the years to come. So it gives people a great deal of empowerment and autonomy to have an early diagnosis. So that's essentially the difference. But underneath that diagnosis of dementia, maybe you've heard of frontal-temporal dementia. Bruce Willis, the actor, is suffering from that. Lewy body dementia. Robin Williams suffered from Lewy body dementia. Maybe you have heard of chronic traumatic encephalopathy that football players seem to be very, very much at risk for. Maybe you've heard of vascular dementia from a series of little strokes. All of these are kind of the ones that percolate up most often. But as I said, there's 120 different types of conditions that could cause confusion that adds up to a dementia diagnosis. So you want to know what kind of dementia it is, and then you want to have a treatment plan with your doctor. And if your doctor says something like, well, it's probably dementia, what do you think your next question should be? What kind? What are we going to do about it? And what is very interesting right now is so many primary care physicians are very interested in being able to give really great care, but they haven't received a lot of training in cognitive health assessment. So we are part of a statewide consortium that is doing some intensive training for primary care physicians that will help them be really good at screenings in their offices, help them get reimbursed for it appropriately too, but then now we have a better baseline. Because all too often, people who are exhibiting really frank symptoms of a dementia never get a diagnosis. And you may have seen this in some of your older friends or family members, loved ones. Only about half the people who very evidently have a very frank presentation of dementia ever get a diagnosis. And what's really sad is when they get the diagnosis, they usually get it when they're in the moderate stage. And then the medications are not going to be nearly as effective, and you may have lost time in planning ahead, and you certainly may have lost time about optimizing your brain health, which we should all be doing today, as Tracy said, and just being here, hearing her speak, has done a lot to optimize your brain power. But even if you have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's type dementia or vascular dementia, you can still do a lot to optimize your brain function and to keep yourself as healthy as possible. So that's the goal. Early identification, accurate diagnosis, and then teasing out what the best protocol for treatment must be. So I hope that answered your question. Okay, other questions? Yes, sir. I'm going to let Tracy answer that. Any value in adding and using mnemonics as a tool?
Sorry, was that mnemonics or? Yeah, so yeah, no, I mean, I think in terms of even at what we did today, we're kind of using what works for us to help us remember things. In terms of what we remember, there's no right or wrong way to help us with our memory. It's whatever works for you personally. Now, if you told me how to remember something using your mnemonics, it might not work for me personally, but if it works for you, great, keep doing it. Love it. Mm-hmm. So mnemonics, in terms of, I think it's like UCLA, it stands for University of California, Los Angeles, kind of utilizing a shortcut to get to where you need to go kind of type thing. In terms of Alzheimer's Orange County, we might abbreviate ourselves to AOC sometimes when writing notes. When I read that, I know what it sounds like, but if you were reading something that I wrote down and I put AOC, you might be, what does that mean? Or who does that stand for? So it just might work for you. It might not work for others, though.
Did you ever take piano lessons when you were younger? If you were learning how to read the staff, your piano teacher would have said, okay, for the line notes, it's all cows eat grass. For the space notes, it's F-A-C-E, face. Those are mnemonics. Other questions or other thoughts? Something that has like a burning notion that you want to see if you can validate? Yes, ma'am.
We have a sister-in-law who's starting to have lots of problems when she's in Wisconsin. Did she call you, talk to you?
Oh, she's in Wisconsin. Their sister-in-law is having some cognitive problems. You can call us, certainly. We will help then connect her and whatever her support system is in Wisconsin to a local community-based organization that can help her there. And there are many, and we're happy to begin that process, sure. I love Wisconsin. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry I had to go to a rehearsal, so I missed some of the presentation.
There's no punishment.
Somebody asked a question about, I've been told that playing a complicated game like bridge or chess is very good for mental stimulation.
You heard right. There are a lot of schools of thought on what we can do to really keep our brains as active and intellectually challenged as possible. The key is it should be something challenging and it should be something novel. So if you've played bridge for 40 years and you're really good at it, learn to play canasta. Okay? Well, it was something a little different that challenges your brain, because if you like to play cards, then you want to do something that's along the lines of what you like, because then you'll do it.
If you notice that you're not as good at playing bridge as you once were, that you should take up an easier game.
No. No, that isn't what I meant. You should try something that challenges your brain in a little bit different way, something novel. Similarly to if somebody said, well, I love square dancing. Is that good for my brain? I would say absolutely, because you have to remember the steps, you have to stay in time to the music, and you're moving your body, which is perfusing your brain at the same time. But I would tell that person, if you really want to increase your brain power, now keep doing your square dancing, but take a salsa class or a ballroom dancing class. Do something that's a little bit different and novel from what you have been doing, okay? But playing bridge is really great intellectual stimulation. And keep doing it, but add something else. Just like if you play pickleball, great, add another physical activity, because one of the most important things you can do to reduce your risk of dementia and stay healthy overall, some people say it's the fountain of youth, and that's exercise. Get up and move your carcass around. The more you move, the better and the healthier you're going to be. And, you know, some of you saw me last year. I started an exercise program just about this time last year, and there's a lot less of me than there was before, and there's going to be less even next year. Get up, move yourself. Don't take the closest parking place at Albertsons. Take the parking place that's the furthest away, and you will be doing some great work for your brain power. Great question. Yes, sir? Oh, not very often, because they can tell that I'm not her. Not exactly, no. She's older than I am. But I wish I had her voice. That's cute, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Oh, that's a really good question. So I'm going to let Tracy really go into this, but it's really less than about 5% of Alzheimer's type dementia that is truly the genetic variant. So unless somebody in your family close to you truly had that young onset form of Alzheimer's disease, where they became ill maybe in their late 50s or early 60s, then if there is dementia in your family, it's unlikely to be the genetic variant. But I'm going to let Tracy expand on that a little bit.
No, thank you, Patty, for that. And yeah, if you have possibly someone in your family that you've seen be diagnosed with memory loss, and it is when they are in their late 60s, 70s, 80s, between 60s and 70s, that's the most common age that we see the diagnosis. And oftentimes it is because of our lifestyle factors. And that's why we like to focus so much on the 6 pillars of healthy aging, because what we do throughout our life can really impact us later on. So again, it could be possible genetics, but like Patty said, it's fairly rare from what studies have seen at this time. And if it is, it's most commonly seen in the young onset. So meaning that it's came on with signs in the late 50s, early 60s. Young onset meaning that it's before the age of 65. Anything after 65 and older is just referred to as Alzheimer's or whatever type of dementia that they might have been diagnosed with. But I do encourage you again to stop by our table there and take one of our calendars, because we do have some classes regarding called Mind Your Brain that goes over the 6 pillars of healthy aging, that can talk about what lifestyle changes that we can implement to therefore love our brain and hopefully lower our risk of cognitive decline. So Patty, if you want to add anything.
Well, thank you. Nicely done. This is the first time Tracy and I have had an opportunity to present to the community together, so it's a real treat. I just love all these young, smart people. Other questions, or did that answer your question about the genetics? Okay, so I have read also that even if it's the sporadic type of Alzheimer's disease, if your mother had it and her mother had it, even if they contracted it later in life, like 75 or 80, then daughters of that pattern have a little higher percentage of risk factor, maybe about 17% higher than their cohorts in the community who did not have a mother and a grandmother that had it. And we're not sure why that is, because it's not truly a genetic variant. But there may be lifestyle factors. There may be, maybe people didn't exercise much, or their diets that grandma's recipes, mom's recipes, and now our recipes were not maybe as healthful as possible. Maybe family patterns included drinking more alcohol than is healthy. Maybe not getting enough sleep was also part of the family culture. So it could be a number of different things that could increase one's risk slightly. Other questions? Very well. Well, we may be giving you a little extra time this morning. We will all be here afterwards. If you have a question, you'd like to pull one of us aside, we're happy to do that. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to be part of this ministry, and I thank Kay for being our organizer. I'm also part of the Faith Community Nursing Program through Hogue, although I'm not a nurse. I raised a nurse. I'm just not a nurse myself. I'm a gerontologist, and we just love being able to come out and speak to church communities like this. So thank you very much. Do say thank you to the folks at Care Choices Hospice and O'Connor Mortuary for bringing not only the tasty snacks and coffee this morning, but they support our work. Because we are a not-for-profit, we rely on the community to support what we do so that we can bring you really highly trained staff like Tracy in order to be able to share this information. So thank you very much. Have a beautiful day.
I want to thank everyone for coming out and great questions. Now remember June what day? And 24th. Nice try. 3rd and 24th. 3rd and 24th. And we'll have, I believe, Dr. Ritter next time, who works with dementia, that kind of thing, and the newest and greatest meds on the block and other venues that he will put out there for you. So please plan on that, put it on your calendar. And then we are having Stop the Bleed coming up. Linda, you still in? Yes. Linda, why don't you just say it real quick? But I do want to thank you.
This coming Tuesday at 2 o'clock at Fellowship Hall, we're offering a Stop the Bleed training for anybody that's willing to come. We're in the process of really negotiating prices to try to get kits for the church. And if we have the kits and nobody knows how to use them, we're still not going to do a good job at taking care of each other if there's a bleeding injury. So for anybody that's willing to come, please consider. You don't have to sign up, just show up. It's going to be kind of a brief overview
All right, thank you. Have a good day.